I had been working the night shift at a motel outside a small town in northern Michigan for almost 8 months when I realized that some of our regular guests were not there to sleep. The motel sat beside a two-lane highway surrounded by woods, farms, and long stretches of nothing. There was a gas station about 3 miles away, and the nearest police station was farther than that. The place had 42 rooms. I knew most of them by memory. Room 101 had a television that sometimes lost its signal. Room 108 had a bathroom door that never closed properly. Room 214 was usually rented to construction workers during the week. Room 307 was one of the rooms management avoided giving to families because the heating system made an awful banging sound during cold nights. I worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. Most nights were boring. That was exactly why I liked the job. After midnight, the motel became almost completely silent. The occasional truck passed on the highway. The vending machines hummed in the lobby. Sometimes I would make coffee, sit behind the front desk, and watch old movies on the tiny television mounted above the office door. There were 2 rules I took seriously. Never leave the front desk unlocked, and never open the side entrance for someone you could not identify. The manager had told me those rules during my first week. At the time, I thought they were just basic security precautions. I did not understand why he kept repeating them. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday in November. A man checked into room 116 just after midnight. He was probably in his 40s, medium height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low over his face. He paid with cash. Nothing about that was particularly unusual. What caught my attention was what he asked after I handed him the key. He pointed toward the hallway. "Which rooms are empty tonight?" I told him that I could not give out information about other guests. He smiled. "I am not asking who is staying there." I still said no. He stared at me for a few seconds, then took his key and walked away. I watched him disappear around the corner. 5 minutes later, I saw him outside through the security monitor. He was standing in the parking lot, not beside his vehicle, just standing there. He was looking at the motel. I watched him for almost a minute before he finally walked toward room 116. I assumed he was smoking. The following night, he was still there. Same room, same dark jacket, same habit of standing outside after midnight. On the third night, he came to the front desk around 2 in the morning. He did not ask for anything. He just stood there. I asked if his room was having a problem. He said no. Then he asked me a strange question. "Do you work here every night?" I told him my schedule was not his concern. He laughed quietly. "I was just wondering." Then he walked away. I remember watching him through the glass doors. He stopped at the end of the hallway. He turned around and looked directly at the security camera. That was when I started feeling uncomfortable. I checked the camera system after he went back to his room. There were 8 cameras around the property: the parking lot, the front entrance, the side entrance, the rear walkway, the office hallway, the vending area, the employee parking area, and the maintenance building. Nothing looked wrong. Then I noticed something. The man from room 116 was not visible on any camera. I checked the hallway camera. Empty. Parking lot. Empty. Front entrance. Empty. I switched back to the hallway camera. Still empty. I looked toward the actual hallway. He was standing there, about 20 feet from me. I nearly jumped out of my chair. He smiled. "Everything okay?" I told him I thought I had seen someone on the camera. He looked at the monitor, then back at me. Probably nothing. He walked away. I stayed behind the desk for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told the manager. He did not seem surprised. He asked me what the man looked like. I described him. The manager sighed. "Did he ask you about empty rooms?" I said yes. He stared at me. Then he told me something I wish I had known earlier. The man had stayed at the motel twice before. Both times, he had asked the same question: which rooms were occupied. The manager had never reported him because he had not technically done anything illegal. That explanation bothered me a lot. The man checked out later that morning. I expected that to be the end of it. It was not. 2 weeks later, a woman came into the lobby around 1 in the morning. She looked exhausted. She had a suitcase with her and kept looking over her shoulder. She asked if we had a room available. I checked the system. We did. She gave me her identification and paid for 1 night. Her hands were shaking. I asked if she was okay. She said she was fine. Then she leaned closer to the counter. "Do you have cameras outside?" I said yes. She looked toward the glass doors. "All around the motel?" I told her there were several cameras. She nodded. Good. I gave her a key to room 203. She took it and walked upstairs. About 20 minutes later, she came back down. She was holding the key. I need a different room. I asked why. She looked frightened. There is somebody outside my window. I immediately checked the camera system. Room 203 was on the second floor. There was a narrow walkway outside the rooms. The camera showed the walkway. Nobody was there. I told her that. She shook her head. I saw someone. I asked whether she knew who it was. No. I asked whether the person had spoken to her. No. Then she said something that changed the way I looked at the entire motel. I think someone has been following me. I told her we could call the police. She immediately said no. That response bothered me even more. She asked for another room. I gave her room 112 because it faced the parking lot and was closer to the lobby. She thanked me and went inside. I watched the security cameras. Nothing happened for almost an hour. Then I saw a vehicle enter the parking lot. It was a dark pickup truck. It drove slowly past the lobby. Then it parked near the far end of the property. The driver remained inside. I watched for several minutes. Then the woman from room 112 came into view. She had stepped outside to smoke. The pickup truck's headlights came on. She froze. The truck started moving. I grabbed the phone and called the room. She answered. Get inside, I told her. She immediately ran toward the building. The truck accelerated. It stopped just outside the lobby. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. I could not see his face clearly. He walked toward the entrance. Then he stopped. He looked directly at the security camera. My stomach dropped. He turned around and got back into the truck. The vehicle left. I called the police. They arrived about 15 minutes later. The woman spoke with them privately. I did not hear what she told them. The officers searched the parking lot and checked the cameras. One of them asked whether the man had been staying at the motel. I told him about room 116. He looked at the other officer. Then they asked me to describe the man. I did. The officer showed me a photograph on his phone. It was the same man. I felt cold. They told me they had been looking for him in connection with several reports involving women who had been followed between towns. They could not tell me much more. They also told me something else. The man had not been staying in room 116. The reservation had been made under a false name. The room had been paid for with cash. And when the police checked the room after he left, they found that he had been spending most of his time watching the parking lot. The police asked me to save the security footage. I did. The woman left the motel before sunrise. I never saw her again. The man was not caught that night. But the motel changed after that. The manager installed additional lights. The side entrance was kept locked at all times. Employees were instructed never to give out information about guests, and every employee was told to report suspicious behavior immediately. I stayed another 3 months. Then something happened that made me quit. It was around 3:30 in the morning. There were only 4 occupied rooms. I was alone at the front desk. The security monitors suddenly went black. Every camera disappeared at the same time. I checked the system. The power was still on. The lobby lights were working. The computer was working. Only the cameras were gone. Then I heard the side door open. I looked toward it. Nobody was there. I stood behind the desk and listened. Footsteps moved down the hallway. Slow. Careful. Someone stopped outside the office. I could see the shadow underneath the door. I reached for the telephone. The shadow moved away. I heard footsteps continue toward the rooms. I called the police. While I was speaking to the dispatcher, I heard a knock. 3 slow knocks on the office door. I did not answer. The knocking stopped. Then someone tried the handle. The door was locked. The handle moved again, harder. I backed away from the door. The dispatcher stayed on the line. Then the person outside stopped. A few seconds later, I heard the side door open. Then, silence. The police arrived shortly afterward. They searched the entire building. Nobody was inside, but they found something behind the motel. A small backpack had been left near the maintenance building. Inside were several items that appeared to have been taken from different vehicles. Nothing valuable, mostly personal belongings. The police believed someone had been entering the property at night and hiding around the buildings. They never proved who it was. The camera system was examined by a technician the next day. There was no equipment failure. Someone had disconnected the camera system manually. The manager asked me whether I wanted to keep working. I quit that afternoon. I never went back. The motel stayed open. As far as I know, it is still there. Sometimes I think about those nights. I used to believe the dangerous part of working alone at night was being somewhere isolated. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing that isolation worked both ways. The people staying at that motel could not always see who was watching them, and neither could I. I still remember the man from room 116. Not because he threatened me. He never did. It was the questions that bothered me. Which rooms were empty? Who worked at night? When the cameras stopped working, he never needed to break a rule in front of me. He only needed to learn how the place worked. And that is what I think about whenever I see a motel sitting beside a dark highway. There are always rooms with the lights off. There are always people sleeping behind locked doors. And sometimes, the person you should be worried about is not the one staying inside a room. It is the one standing outside, quietly learning which doors are occupied.